You know, this show of Martin ZET, Martin ZET is an artist from Czech Republic. The show for me is very problematic in many ways, primarily because the experience that Martin ZET had in his evolution as an artist is so totally different from any experience I had. In other words, he had the experience of moving from communism to narcissism. And he had to struggle with the idea of becoming an artist. He went to the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague, in his home country. He studied there for 6 years, and he focused, as everyone else did, on social realism. When he left, he was perfectly capable of sculpturing various things. For example, the head in back of me is a good example of a perfectly sculptured, with difficulty, rock head. So we went from social realism to this search to find an involvement that he considered fundamental to his growth as a human being and as someone who has been newly freed from a country where, I mean, certain things were okay, but in reality he couldn't leave the country. You know, then the change comes. It's called the Velvet Revolution. The Soviet Union falls, the whole environment begins to change, and then this artist has to face the fact, now that I'm free, in quotes, what do I do? How do I deal with this new freedom? I mean, the sense of being free, we have to remember, was this powerful moment in their lives that we only saw on television. I mean, but they had that moment of one day they were still involved in the system, and the next day they were free and they didn't know what. For an artist, it was really the question of, you know, what do I do now? And how can I deal with this? How can I examine this freedom that I have? And that's what I think this show is about, is his examining the freedom that he has, probably only to realize that an artist can only do be truthful about himself and, you know, make works that speak to people's hearts.
Because I would never put them together without being asked to try it. Because I usually try to make the shows from the very new things, or to make the things for the new exhibition, because one of the reasons why to make the show, or why to make the exhibition for me, is to make some new work.
Well, I think every artist, for example, when he was an artist, he was either an official artist or he could join a small little group or collective of intellectuals, and they would show in apartments and in the houses and so on. That was the choice. And he decided he didn't like either one. So he went out of Prague, out of the city, and began working entirely on his own, without this kind of small whatever. Lone wolf. You know, a lot of artists that I respect are really out there by themselves for whatever reason. Sometimes they develop people around them, like Sal, but usually they're on their own. And I think those artists, I think they're special, even among artists. I mean, Jackson Pollock was a typical outsider. I mean, he was very screwed up. He was an alcoholic. He was this. He was that. But he made it very clear.
The Red Flags piece has a long name, and it is no country is safe from revolution, or from the idea of revolution, even the one which proclaims revolution to be its basic principle. And I think this title, together with the flag, should say everything.
Well, you can see, well, you know, in effect, social realism, the Russian form, not as much the Mexican form, had a little bit of invention in it, but the Russian form really was a 19th century style. And so you would see, and anybody that was trained in social realism is trained in a 19th century or earlier style. So that's what you see it perhaps in this piece, but you also see a surface that's stained with oil. That's very interesting to me. Black and stained with oil. So there's also a subtext, which I think when they were over there, that's what they had to do. They had to work in an official way, but always there was a kind of irony or subtext under it. And you know, look, I've known this work, and I've known him for, what, 15 years, and I've been interested in his work. But as far as understanding it, I'm just at the beginning. One of the reasons for doing the show, my personal reasons for being involved in the show, is just to see more of his work over a long period of time. We've really seen very little from the old, what was the Soviet-controlled Eastern Europe. We've seen very little. Why is that? We have our bases there. We have this here. We have that. We don't know their life or their intellectual life. Well, the first flag is the pirate flag. Applies to everybody in all periods, right? It's the flag of, actually, it's the flag of the next two. One is the European Union flag, and the other one's the American flag. And the red, on one hand, represents blood. So that, it seems to me that he's, you know, you have to say that, you know, here's an artist who's in that situation, who came out of that, who's working with a dichotomy, and I think that's what it shows. But what it tells me is all of those people are pirates over there, the one flag and the other flag, are really all nationalists. Have any, in an international world, we're not interested in nationalists anywhere.
I had this neon sign for the performance in Piotrkov Tribunalski, where I didn't know my face when they were inviting Martin ZET, so we came there two as Martin ZET, and nobody till the last minute knew who is the real one. and they made this sign for us, and we hired small children, and they were walking with this sign through the city. And then it was in my studio, and I got this idea that would be fantastic to have this bike which makes electricity to lead it